that this language in which that what you would say is the females had was capable of doing that. And this language also, if you notice, like within Hebrew, for instance, that a Hebrew word makes the same symbol when you visualize it. Meaning that you can say tones and vibrations and they make symbols, and you can actually visualize those symbols. Some of that can be visualized within things like cymatics. Some can be visualized by using geometry and spinning a geometric figure and then recording or drawing the different images that appear within the angles. And so this is basically how you would convert sound to an actual shape, like a drawing. And so it's kind of like a way of reverse engineering. And in the reverse engineering, it was found out that Hebrew it actually appears as the symbol when you say it. So you can realize then that obviously, okay, well, the big thing that is happening is that these languages are really in themselves the technologies or the keys and components to actually manipulating realities. And so again, if we're still looking into the society of where the divine feminine or the feminine is predominantly residing in what we would call the astral plane or the dream world, while the male is becoming a custodian for the physical world, then you can see that the masculine language was predominantly for use in physical realities, even to a point where it just was coming down to numbers and the use of numbers and conducting systems in realities that are based on numbers. And now we kind of see that as like our money systems. We see that as our identification systems, etc. But there was an organizational system within these numbers. So if you wanted a little bit more insight just on that alone of whether that's authentic or not, we can then take a look again at Hebrew, and we can take a look at Arabic, as I've mentioned, to being the double-edged sword in itself, or the double-edged words or words of power that are also weapons. We also see that one of the languages is actually far more curvier than the other, and we know that for a fact. So we know that Arabic is actually, as you're writing it, is a completely circular language, while Hebrew, the original Hebrew, is actually made from angles from the tetrahedron. So basically, it's a hypercube in itself, so straight lines. And even though now, what you're looking at a lot of Yiddish, even now there's curves in the language. Originally, Hebrew did not exist with those curves, right? So that again says that even in this time now, we have replicas. The other one was hieratic and demotic script, and I think we talked about that before. That was two different languages, that one was being used by the priestcraft and one was being used by the regular people. And again, if you can say then a priestcraft, more than likely it was priestesses or sibyls. They had one language, while the males, again, banking and all these things, they had another. Commerce, they had another. And so this is how, if you can imagine, again, this is what was being called an advanced culture. This is the array of an advanced culture in one large segment of time that also still continues to this day, because we're still in this configuration of male being one and then female being another, and them coming together and creating. So now that we're entering into that sanctum, there was a couple of words that were mentioned, mainly in this case uru and an, which we encounter in many of our linguistic works that kind of start diving into, so, what are the names of these tribes, or what are the names of these ancestors? And one of these names that came across was Uru An El Alim. So that's Uru, An, or A-N-L, as in Elohim, and Alim, and how this configuration specifically was, let's say, the armada of ancestors that were here just recently. And this word later on became Jerusalem, as everything is kind of rolled together. But the reason why I'm honing in on that is that I wanted to just kind of speak about these ancient bloodlines, and very briefly about like what was really the objectives of each respective party, whatever part of time they arrived in, because there's a kind of energy that I feel coming. There's an energy that I feel around ancient how could I say it, ancient objectives, right? There's an energy around ancient objectives. And this energy, which makes it easier to understand the whole ancient structure, because it could get really deep. You get into math, you get into all types of stuff, and that's more of talking about the power. But if you start really just pulling back off of it and saying, so what was really going on? What was really going on is, like, imagine that you're kind of looking at me and you see that there's things that I have that you like, and there may be some things that I have that you don't like. And what you're interested in is the things that I have that I like. And so what you want to do is you want to kind of get those things from me. Okay, so let's just take it as the most basic thing. So if you went out into nature, right, and then you saw certain animals, and you said, well, shoot, that one could fly. And I like the way they can fly, but I definitely don't like the way they're being hunted down by cats. So, or big cats. So I'm going to be a flying big cat. Oh, okay, I definitely like the way that one can kind of hear at night or see at night. So I'm going to be a flying big cat that can see at night. And it was, oh, shoot, that one's got like a echolocation kind of sonar kind of language or oracular. I'm going to be a flying bird. That, you see what I mean? So it was like a thing where when you saw genetics and you saw DNA and it was supreme, you would really want that. That's really what Uru an El Alim is really all about. Okay. And so, just on the most cleanest, most basic way of understanding life and an existence, it is just that. Witnessing things that you would like and then going through the process of how to adapt those things. Now, some go through that process in entirely different ways. And what we've actually seen through history is that we've actually had large groups even, or very violent groups that have seen something that someone else has, whether it's land, spiritual power, ability, a mantle, you name it, and has attempted to acquire those or try to acquire those things in a variety of ways. And again, seeing that violence doesn't seem to be off limits, it also seems like that another part of this realm is the necessity of protection, or what's just called a professional technology. And what we find is that it's actually the aura that is around our body that is the professional technology that was embedded in us or given to us by our ancestors. Because what it does is it kind of puts actually 9 life rafts around us. That's just another thing about a life raft. If you go to the pool, they generally have this life raft and it looks like a donut, right? That's a torus. And so there's really 9 donuts. Generally, well, okay, let me clarify here. As you're degrading more, you have less donuts. This kind of is even reflected within enealogy as being one personality. But at this point, we're kind of talking about the original form and the ancestral form. So the original form, ancestral form as a plasma being has 9 donuts around the body. And these 9 donuts are also forms of protection because the level of energy coming off of this field is almost unapproachable. And that's why it's in the end of the conversation. I was wondering when I would be able to fit this in. But one, you can say what you want, but your words have no power. Okay, so these beings are on another level completely. And again, as you're putting your metaphysical tool belt together, I would advise that you adapt such things. Now, what was already regulated was the language. That's what I was explaining earlier. So when the English language came out, it virtually has no power. So this is why humans are really allowed to say what they want. They're even able to think that they're blaspheming the names of the gods. But the truth is that they don't actually even know how to really say the words. They don't say them right. And it doesn't come from their core and the essence of their being. So thus, the words don't have any power. So from the realm of the gods, they're not really concerned about what the humans are saying. That's why there's a freedom of speech. Okay. Also, no human will ever assail them, okay? And what that means is that for sure, no human who has not singularized their color spectrum, singularized their color spectrum, basically been able to collapse their donuts into one plasma cloud, if you may. This is like playing the racial game, playing what you would call fragmented personality game, right? Where you're not being the whole thing, you're just being one dimension of it. You can never assail these beings, like meaning that you can't even enter into their presence or into their vibration or into their frequencies. So just for the record, humanity in the degraded state is not on the same level or interfacing with the ancestral elder gods and ancient ones. Generally what they're affiliating with is many of the underlings. Here's also what is a key to the dynamics, and many occultists have been working on this for quite a bit of time. It is the personal great work, and that is to gain a plasma field around your body, meaning to actually reassemble the 9 donuts. And that's where enealogy gets in. Now, all of the ancient cultures all roll on the 9. The tree of Yggdrasil. I mean, there's so many examples of the 9 realms of Dante's Inferno, etc. So the 9 is all over the place. The Enneagram, or the Ennead of the Arabs, or excuse me, the Kemetans. So it's all over the place. That 9 is the number. And when we start realizing, to simplify this, well, how does that play out in our everyday lives? It does play out as, well, okay, well, I'm acting out as this number. And once you understand the numbers, you really can say, yeah, that is a lot of my traits. And being aware of that will kind of let you understand, well, how the gods built the world. And because they built the world with these 9 pieces, if you may. And to reconstruct the entire world, you need to bring all 9 of those pieces together. So that also gives us like just some really strong primary objectives. And that's one, either we and I call these power groups, and I don't like to keep adding new things, but I am getting transmissions that, there's a few hundred of us that are actually here. So I'm sure we have 1 to 9 quite a few times as far as individual people inside this tribe that are actually resonating a specific number and wouldn't mind coming together as a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 in a council and be like a power group. But what that does also require, though, is that you are yourself. And that, of course, is the number one requirement of ambassador training and soul coaching is that you just know how to be yourself. Because then once you're being a true, let's say, 4, I believe that it would be very instrumental to put 1 to 9 together and begin to set forth objectives that are transdimensional. Also, definitely being able to affect this space, but other spaces, because you're in a very unique configuration. And metaphysics says that this will work. The other option is, because you don't want to be just waiting on 9 people to come together, because sometimes that will be pretty tough. I think we can get it accomplished here, though. But that is that you become the 9 within. And this means that you actually graduate from finally being so into yourself as, this specific path, and you start exploring other paths in the realm to see how you're really everything, right? Then once this happens, according to the real research and real experiences, not only of my own, but others that are actually in the league itself, is that then what happens is, okay, so let's explain what exactly happens when you become the 9. So, as you know, we're over here, we're speaking intelligently. We have these languages and stuff like that, and we have reasons. Like we know that we're hungry here in a moment, or we got something to do after this, so we're intelligent, okay? So to imagine that the higher consciousness is not intelligent is stupid. Right? So it's like, let's just get that off the plate. Because some people think the higher intelligence or higher things or whatever, they just, I don't know, there's weird concepts, but no, this thing is hyper-sentient, right? And it just so happens that where we think we are, what we think we're passing through, where we're going is all it. And you could just call it the wormhole, okay? And the wormhole is very conscious. And there are laws and rules of the wormholes, and they put those laws and rules together kind of like the same thing as when you create a DAO or a council. There's like rules that have been tried and true already, and we just go by those rules rather than repeating ourselves on the mistake processes. There's like, there's galactic laws, if you may, here, and you follow those laws and everything will always work just according to those laws. And one of those laws are, and it can be witnessed within gyroscopes, that if you have 2 gyroscopes and you spin them both up, but you make one of them slower than the other, they will synchronize. right? It's just a weird phenomenon. Eventually they synchronize, even if they get started later or they both are doing a different spin. And this is because one field picks up the other. And that's the easiest way to explain the wormhole itself, the transitional process, the upgrades, time travel, manifesting, etc., is that it's all run, if you may, by a field that is hypersentient, that when you phase lock into, meaning that when you are just being true in your true self, it will then pick you up because you're right on its frequency, and that's how it works. And the further you get away from that frequency, meaning the further you get away from perfection, then you would then phase into other frequencies and other dynamics. But in the event that you wanted to come home and come back to self, then all you would have to do is in your own way. You don't have to be as powerful as the 9. It's infinitely powerful. So it's not that you're saying, okay, I got to get like that. It's already going to happen when you do your own variant of that. And that's what we're exploring here at Secret Energy, is like, what are those variants? What are the dynamics to that? What are basically the metaphysical metrics to that? What is the celestial mechanics to that? And in a collective, since we have those that are sharing this message also, and that this is a universal message, we can actually even begin to update what is the progress that we're all making in this process of what is being termed, and Dan Winter is terming it this way, ensouling a being, basically giving a being a soul. Now, I find this interesting. This is actually the height of what I wanted to build on tonight, because the things that were mentioned about a person who has a soul, I was actually able to do when I was a child very specifically, versus it seems like that is being, how can I put this, that is being sought after by something else that does not have that ability. So ability that becomes natural for us, some others don't actually have those abilities at all, and they're looking to gain it from us. And this actually creates a narrative within all of our societies, because some are basically naturally ensouled already because their ancestors were ensouled. However, it also appears like in the overall consensus that many of those ancestors became very predatory. In fact, the image itself of the predator is them, that they were more of a warrior clan. They were more on the line of, as we were saying, the deep, dark reptilian, also the hive mind structure matriarchal. And that's another thing that you just can't ignore from matriarchal colonies, is that they're hive minds also. There's actually very specifically a colony versus a hive mind. And that'll be something that I maybe get into a little bit later. But in a hive, everything is tied into the mother brain, if you may. And so when something is trying to flee the hive, it actually needs to disconnect itself from the mother brain. So it's just that awareness that when we say patriarch, when we say matriarch, there's a whole subset of system structure and data of how those actually run. And us being able to even look at them now, we can kind of see why certain things would have went a certain way if that was actually the pretense of how those societies have to run. So whether they're in outer space or hyper quantum celestial, if they're sentient at all, you're going to logically run into some of the same basic rudimentary fundamentals. And that's why algorithms work so well, because algorithms are set based on basic rudimentary fundamentals. And no matter how complex things seem to get, those things still work. And that's what I was saying, that's called the galactic laws. So again, it just so happens that, for the record, that many of the gods that are not only being worshipped, but are actually genetically connected to races and tribes that are here on the earth, have been flagged by many of the spiritual councils as being predatory and parasitic. So it is in certain ways like your uncle, right, that is off balance and causing lots of harm and lots of hurt within the family, right, or your aunt that may be doing that same thing. So we can't say, again, as we've examined, that all of the ancestors from everybody's tribe was all balanced, right, because this has been a work in progress. and there's a consistent looking or observing something, seeing what went on, and then upgrading your own system based on those outcomes. I.e., when my mom said, James, learn from other people's mistakes. Okay? So, but just understand the energetics around this, though, because as I said before, some of the things that were described as a person that has a soul, and we'll start talking about some of that now, one of the main things is that an ensouled person, when they're, not only can they lucid dream, but when they lucid dream, they bring things from the lucid dream into the physical reality. This is something that I've heard Dan Winter specifically say about a group of people that were working together to accomplish that, and one of them was able to go through a lucid dream and then even come back with pieces of sand on his feet and a little water